So let's talk about the world location. I looked at various narrow neck locations. Throw in Baja California, Denmark, Egypt, England, Florida, Italy, Korea, Malaysia, Mexico, the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, Nicaragua, the Isthmus of Darien, Panama, Russia, Turkey, or the Bosporus Straits, and Turkey, Georgia, Russia, between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Those are all the places that have some kind of narrow neck that has some kind of access to a West Sea. To save time, only the Isthmus of Tehuantepec in Mexico meets all the criteria. I've got a website that goes through all of them. I just don't want to go through it right here. Fits all 173 cities, lands, mountains, hills, ridges, battle sites, waters, accurate relationships, no duplicate places. So the Isthmus of Tehuantepec is 129 miles across, so that's well within the 15 to 200 mile really rough estimate that we were trying to come up with earlier. In terms of no cold or snow, these are temperature maps, one in January, one in July. In January, even the highlands can average 68 degrees. In the summertime, the highlands will average 77, much, much hotter in the lowlands. So really no cold or snow in that location of the world. East wind, I plotted the hurricane tracks since 1886 through 2003. There's kind of been not a whole lot since 2003 that have made landfall in the Mexico area. A couple, but not enough for me to update the map. You can see that a lot of the tracks and the blue dots are where it made landfall. So there's certainly plenty of tracks in this area of hurricanes hitting the Mesoamerica area. And King Limhi, when he made the comments in Mosiah about the east wind of destruction, would be right about there. So that's well within the hurricane tracks. Take a look at the wildernesses in the northern part of the lands when we're talking about the Book of Ether. We have lands, wildernesses described here, along here, and then up and along here. You can see the very same places that mountains in that mountainous area exists in that part of the world. If we take a look at where the wildernesses existed in the southern lands, you can see again they center around where hilly environments are occurring. So all the wildernesses fit. There are no wildernesses described in the Book of Mormon someplace where there would be flat areas. There's also one wilderness up west of Mulek, and there's a ridge. This would be somewhere around Cancun, and there's a bluff or a ridge just to the west of it, which is fairly significant. It has a northward flowing river. What's highlighted here in red is in the upper reaches it's called the Rio Salinas, and in the lower reaches it's the Rio Usumacinta. The headwaters occur up in here. They flow down through what would be the South Wilderness and northward in that direction. And we'll talk about this east and west branches later on. Then we have the land northward, talking about land of large bodies of water and many rivers. We have two large bodies, the Lago de Texcoco, which is where Mexico City is right now. They've drained it, so it doesn't really exist except for, it's about a 30 hectare size lake right now, but they drained it in 1604. Then Lake Chapala up here are on the outer reaches of this river system, the Rio Balsas, or locally also known as the Mezcala. And you can see there's quite a few rivers in that drainage system. So that meets the definition of land northward. In terms of geological forces that cause the destructions, this is a seismicity map of Mexico. The brown are the places that really get shook during an earthquake. So it certainly has earthquakes that can be used to describe the destructions in terms of raising ground or creating valleys. We have, by comparison, in the United States, this is what the seismicity map looks like. We've got the Madrid Fault here in the Midwest, most of the activity is in California. And I know that there's some that propose a heartland theory for a location, but you see there's really no seismicity in the area where a heartland theory would have to explain some kind of ground breaking up. This is a map of Guatemala. The cities that were destroyed by fire would be right in this corridor right here. This is a map that I was able to locate from a Guatemalan journal, the Prensa Libre, and translation is the main cause of accidents, translation being forest fires, are agricultural roses, poorly made. These are the fires set by the farmers to clear land. Cigarette butts in areas with dry grass, it's kind of obvious. Spray bottles that are thrown into vacant sites. I was trying to figure out how that started a forest fire, but it's enough to say it's one of the common ways that a forest fire starts. And weather conditions, meaning lightning. So much of Guatemala, and especially the area that were described as being destroyed by fire coming down, certainly is consistent with the descriptions in the Book of Mormon. So other geographical forces that were evident, the east wind of destruction, showed the charts for that earlier. Water that comes up, I will discuss when I get into the proofs. There is a proof for that. Talk about shipping in land that is devoid of trees. We have land desolation here by the narrow neck. There happens to be these lagoons down here called Mar Muerta. And those have actually been used as shipping lagoons or shipping ports even before Columbus. The locals in the area would use those for shipping. So they've been used for shipping for a long time. They're fairly stable lagoons. You can get from there, you can travel by water all the way up to where the Rio Balsas comes out. So that is one way to get wood from this narrow neck area, which there's plenty of wood in that area, to a port, up to this arid area where the Rio Balsas is. It's quite arid. You have shrubs, you do have some trees close to the water line. And I've got a picture of that coming up. So that's consistent. And we have, it's consistent with people traveling a long distance to be able to get into the land northward. And there are two ways to do that by land, and I will also be describing those in slides coming up. There's a pass here, and there's a pass here. There's two ways to get into the land northward. Otherwise, it's surrounded by mountains. It's very difficult. This is a picture of the Rio Balsas as it is close to the ocean. You can see it's very wide, it's very placid, very easy to get shipping up into that area. And you can also see that the hills back here, these are all shrubs, really no trees to speak of. All the trees are located close to the more permanent sources of water. very easy for some population to outstrip the amount of wood there. And it being an arid location, they don't grow back very fast. If we talk about connected lands, we have connected lands up here, they fit. Some connected lands here, Gimgimno, Jacob, Gadiandi, Gadiamna, Ishmael, Nephi, Shalom, Shemlon, Lemuel. So all of the cities that were listed before do fit together in connected lands in this location. So the weather in central Mexico consists of 5 months of rainy season that starts in May and ends in September. So if the first part of the year is in the spring, that's the dry season. And so this is a picture of the same place in both the wet season and the dry season. You can see there's quite a bit of difference. Much easier to travel in the dry season. There's not as much vegetation. Also, it's not going to be as muddy. So based on the wars that we know that the Mayans pursued, they were all done typically during the dry season. A few in the wet season, but mostly in the dry season. Polity sizes. These are the cities and lands in the Book of Ether. Not a whole lot of them, so you could draw kind of whatever circle you want around them pretty much. Determine what size of area they controlled. So not really a lot of information here. There's reference here. This is the red circle is a 20 mile diameter circle. So that's, you can see they all fit there. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of cities in the Book of Ether described. When we get to the book of the other books in the Nephites, there's a lot of cities, a lot of lands, and yet in this area, they can all fit in at least a 20-mile-an-hour diameter land. Some cases 25 to 30, and in a few cases, the lands could actually be the size of 40 miles, which are the blue circles. So it's a pretty densely packed number of lands, and yet it does meet the definition in the Book of Mormon for what the size of the lands need to be. So I'm just going to go through just a quick couple of slides on the Book of Ether. It starts off by the Great Tower, and the Great Tower would be located in the upper Euphrates River system. They went up and then down into a valley. The only way you can kind of go up and then down into a valley is through two places in Turkey, and they both lead into the Araxes River Valley. And the Araxes River Valley starts about here, flows into the Caspian Sea, which is the description of where the Brotherhood of Jared and those people had to stop and create barges to cross the sea in the wilderness. So that's consistent. And then you can move across generally what would be what we would call the Silk Road, or what the Silk Road would be called later as trade was going across China, and go to a point on the China coast, and there happens to be a mountain right here, and a mountain that has minerals that could be mined, could explain the descriptions in the Book of Ether. So they got onto their barges and float across the ocean, 344 days, to land somewhere in this location that we've targeted. I did find a online tool application that is used to track items that fall overboard off of ships, and they can backtrack the floating of those to wherever they land up on the shores to figure out where they were in the ocean at a particular time, and they can actually pinpoint generally which ship that stuff fell off of. So I used that, and I plugged in, okay, can I put in a drift starting about here And where does it go? Well, I was able to find, and they have data that goes back about 30 or 40 years, so not a great deal of background information, but at least enough to try something. So I tried it, and I found one date that I could plug in something here, and it would float all the way down here, down to just offshore of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, and guess how many days it took to do that? 11 and a half months, which is right around 344 days. And they did land upon the shore of the Promised Land. So when we're talking about the Book of Ether and where it most likely occurred in the world, we're talking about where Mexico City is, or where Lake Texcoco started off, all the way down to the Narrow Neck or the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. A couple references for hilly from right there, but that's generally the lands that we're talking about in the Book of Ether. That's the general location. Okay, Nephites. Lehi left Jerusalem, went south, and in about 3 days you get to a location here on the Gulf of Aqaba. We call it the Gulf of Aqaba, but the people in history didn't call it the Gulf of Aqaba. They called it either the Red Sea or the Reed Sea. So in about 3 days, that's where you end up. And what you end up there is the only one of two perennial rivers in Saudi Arabia. And this is a picture of what it looks like. It's not much, but it does flow year-round. It is protected by some very high, steep canyon walls, which does help the water from being evaporated. But it's one of two perennial streams in Saudi Arabia, right there. So from there, they went south-southeast. That direction would take you down the coast of the Red Sea or Reed Sea, down to a place called Nahom, and from there, they wandered for a while, but they ended up to a place on the east. And just a short description, the trade routes in Saudi Arabia all went this direction through this area. When you get down to about here, the bluffs, the mountainous region in Saudi Arabia actually goes to the coastline, so it kind of cuts off any further travel along the coast. So what do? Well, you start going inland. There's a place to go up the escarpment, and you go inland. And somebody found several years ago a place called NHM, or Nail, right there, right where you have to depart from the coast and go inland. The place here, there's two places on the coast, east coast here, which have been known for shipbuilding. They have water, and they do have trees. And these are some pictures. One is Salalah and the other is Wadi Sek. And these are just pictures of what they look like. So it does look very bountiful. So when we get across the great waters over into the New World with the Nephites, we're talking about they lived in an area from the many large bodies, so Lake Chapala and Lake Texcoco, all the way down to northern Honduras would be where they were located, in the lands and the cities. And 1 Nephi 5:12 or 18:23, and it came to pass that after we had sailed forth for the space of many days, we did arrive again at the Promised Land. And I would say they landed in the exact same place as the Jaredites in the Mar Muerto area. Okay, so let's go into some specific proofs. So these are my testimony of the truth of the Book of Mormon. So what do I mean by a proof? Well, I mean geographical description that is accurate and only known after 1831. So it wasn't on any map. It's not recorded anywhere. Means the description could only have come from a first-hand account local to the geography before the geography appears on any map. The order of progression is a reminder. I created the internal model first in 2002, so that was just where things were relative to each other. So once those relative positions are fixed, you can't shift them. So you can't take that information, put it in the world and say, well, this doesn't quite fit, so I'll manipulate that a little bit. You can't do that. You've got all the relationships. Those relationships have to be maintained wherever you put them in the world. The world location came next. Spent a couple years doing that. So the descriptions of the proofs that I go through in the very exact places where they need to be there. You can't shift them somewhere else and say, well, it's not here, but it's over here. That's close enough, so we'll say that's close. You don't get that. It has to be exactly where your internal map says it has to be. So what proofs exist? I'm going to talk about intersecting valleys, and these are described in the Book of Ether. There's a valley west and a valley east by the hill Riplah. That's described in the Book of Alma. The hill Amnihu is described also in the Book of Alma. The destruction of Moroni, Jerusalem, and Mokum and Onahah by water. These are destructions in 3rd Nephi. Plains in Mesoamerica. These are described in both Ether and Alma. Narrow passes, described in Alma and Mormon. And the pass between Nephi and Moroni. This is described in Alma. Now we'll go through each of these. So let's start off with the intersecting valleys. I start off with this one because it's very simple. In the Book of Ether, there are two armies, Shiz and Coriantumr, had a running battle to the sea shore. Then they went away from the sea shore and they went through some valleys up to a large body of water. These are in Ether 662, 1426 in the LDS. Just for the sake of time, the summary that I provided, it's in those, like I said, they started off somewhere in the Narrow Neck area. They had a running battle to the east seashore, had a battle, left from there. They went through two valleys, Valley of Shur and the Valley of Korihor. And from there, they went to a large body of water, or the body of water that was largest. So what we have is, as a summary, we need to have somewhere we get to the east seashore. From there, we have to get through two intersecting valleys, because there are two valleys that the two armies were in and they were next to each other and they had some battles there. And that has to lead to a very large body of water. Pretty straightforward. Well, this part by the Isthmus of Tehuantepec has that geography. You can start in the Narrow Neck. You can travel to the east seashore. You can also do that along the river. And if you're having two warring armies, that's going to be the easiest way you travel is down a river system or river valley. You can get to the east seashore, and from there you can actually change direction, come up another river valley, and go through one of those two places I mentioned to get through the mountains. There's a valley here, and then there's a valley here. These intersect. And from there, once you get up into this valley, you can travel all the way to Lake Texcoco, which is the largest body of water in Mexico. So it fits the Book of Mormon description to a T. There is no other location in the world that has this simple connection between east seashore, intersecting valleys, large body of water. These valleys were not included on maps until after 1865. So this is a very simple yet powerful proof. So let's talk about the Valley West and the Valley East by the hill Riplah. This is one of the last proofs that I investigated because it's very, very, very specific. It had to occur in one place, only one place. And literally, I did not know that I would find what I was looking for. So let's go through what we mean by this. So in the book of Alma, the Nephite army was led by Moroni, and the Lamanite army was led by Zarahemna. They had a battle near the hill Riplah in the land of Manti. Now, the land of Manti was located near the headwaters of the river Sidon. And we get that from Alma 13:69. And it talks about that the borders of Manti by the head of the river Sidon. So we have that connection. Part or one side of the land of Manti was wilderness, and part or the other side was not. We get this from Alma 26:134, LDS 58:13. And thus we did go forth with all of our might against the Lamanites who were in the city of Manti, and we did pitch our tents by the wilderness side, which was near the city. So this provides a distinct description where the headwaters of the river Sidon pass through the land of Manti, where the wilderness or the hilly terrain transitioned to non-wilderness or flatter terrain. So Moroni positioned his army near this area in the valley on the west of the river Sidon and the wilderness side of the land of Manti. And the valleys contain a stream or river, so Alma 20:27 or 43:24. And it came to pass that the word of the Lord came unto Alma, and Alma informed the messenger of Moroni that the armies of the Lamanites were marching round about in the wilderness, and going on to Alma 20:31. And it came to pass that Moroni caused that his army should be secreted in the valley which was near the bank of the river Sidon, which was on the west of the river Sidon in the wilderness. Very descriptive piece of information. Moroni divided his army and put part of it in a valley on the east of the river Sidon, and part of that of the east valley was placed on the south side of the hill Riplah, and this location concealed that army from the Lamanite army, and then we get this from Alma 20:35 or 43:31. Therefore he divided his army and brought his part over into the valley and concealed them on the east, on the south side of hill Riplah, and the remainder concealed on the west valley, on the west of the river Sidon, and so down into the borders of the land Manti. So we have a description of a valley on the west, a valley on the east. We've got a hill Riplah, and on the south side of that you can hide an army. So when the Lamanite army came by and went on the north side of hill Riplah, on the north side was where the river Sidon was, and we get this from Alma 20:37 or 43:34. And it came to pass that the Lamanites came up on the north side of the hill, where a part of the army of Moroni was concealed, or the hill Riplah. And as the Lamanites had passed the hill Riplah and came into the valley and began to cross the river Sidon, the army and here's that indicator word again, cross. So there's water, they're crossing the river. The army which was concealed on the south of the hill, which was led by the man whose name was Lehi, and he led his army forth and encircled the Lamanites round about on the east in the rear. So here we have the armies engaged in battling each other. This is what it looks like on a internal map. So we have the river Sidon, we have Manti here, we've got South Wilderness here, we've got the hill Riplah here, we have a valley on the west, a valley on the east. This valley on the east comes on the north side of the hill. We've got the Lamanites coming on the north side of the hill, trying to cross the river. We've got the army of Lehi behind on the south side of the hill Riplah coming in around them. We've got the army of Moroni on the front side, so as they crossed the river, they engaged. They tried to turn them back. They tried to retreat, but they couldn't because the army of Lehi was behind them. Great battle maneuver, took care of the Lamanites. But you can see very, very, very detailed description of the terrain. All right, so in summary, we've got headwaters of a river where it transitions from a flat land to hilly mountainous land, has a valley on the west that extends into the hilly mountainous land, has a valley on the east, has a hill on the south side of the river on the east, and the river is on the north side of the hill. There is a space on the south side of the hill to hide an army. So, we should be able to find this place, right? It's pretty detailed. You can see why I hesitated to even look for this place, just because of the amount of detail that was necessary. Well, I looked, and it turns out where the Usumacinta or Rio Salinas River transitions from the flat to hilly land, there is a branch that comes to the west and into the mountainous area here. There's a branch that goes to the east and comes up this way. Now, the significance of this is that in this part of the country, the Lamanite army was coming from a place over here on the east. This mountainous terrain right here does not have a break to get through until you get to this river system. This river system has been the way to get from the south part to the north part for many, many years. Much in the way of Mayan trading is known to have gone right through here. This is the only way through the mountains. This is why the Lamanites were coming through here. It's the only way. So they come down through. The river is on the north side of this hill, and this being a flat hill, not a pointy conical hill, you have plenty of room on the south side of this to hide an army. And enough away from the river that you're not going to be known to the Lamanite army as they're traveling down through here. This occurs only on the Usumacinta River. No other place in the world does this occur. There's no comparable geography on the Grijalva River, which is the other north flowing river in Mexico and used as some people as a location for Book of Mormon lands. This doesn't exist there. This is unique to the world. That's all I can say. This is unique. The smaller river on the West Valley doesn't even show up on maps until 1922 or 1934, somewhere in that area. Does it even start showing up on maps? Let's talk a little bit about the Hill Emnihu. Description of the Hill Emnihu is in Alma 165 and 170, or LDS 212, 215. Therefore, the people of the Nephites were aware of the intent of the Amlicites, and therefore they did prepare to meet them. And it came to pass that the Amlicites came upon the hill of Emnihu, which was east of the river Sidon, which ran by the land of Zarahemla, and there they began to make war with the Nephites. The Nephite army pushed back the Amlicite army, and the Amlicite army retreated to the city of Minon and joined a Lamanite army that came up to meet them there. The Nephite army stopped at the Valley of Gideon. We get this from Alma 176 or 220. And it came to pass that when Alma could pursue the Amlicites no longer, they caused that his people should pitch their tents in the Valley of Gideon. So the Valley of Gideon is on the east of the river Sidon. We get that from Alma 4:8. And they went over upon the east of the river Sidon into the Valley of Gideon. So we know the locations on the east side. The Amlicites joined forces with Lamanites in Minon, a little further south in the Valley of Gideon, and as the Amlicites and Lamanites started to come back towards Zarahemla, a battle ensued, and the Amlicites and Lamanites were driven to the northwest into the Hermounts, a wilderness or hilly area. We get that from Alma 195 or LES 236. So the summary is Zarahemla is on the west of the river, and there should be a way to cross the river from west side to east side. There's a hill on the east of the river. There's a valley further south along the river, and the river Sidon flows north to south, and the river in the Valley Gideon flows into the river Sidon from the east. And there's hills and mountains northwest of the valley. So this is what it looks like on an internal map. People from Zarahemla met the Amlicite army at the Hill Emnihu, pushed them back. The Amlicites went down to Minon. The Nephite army stopped at the Valley Gideon, sent some spies to see what was going on. People in Minon said, "We're getting out of here," and headed up to Zarahemla. So, if we take a look at that part of Guatemala-Mexico border, we actually do find a hill right here on the east between Zarahemla and this valley that comes in the Rio Passion from the east. When you try and come back up along the river and you have a battle off here to the northwest, is hilly terrain. So this hill on the east side of the river, this is what it looks like from a satellite picture. Very nondescript even from a satellite picture. I had to draw a line around it. This right here is the size of the hill. It's about 400 feet high, which is a pretty good sized hill. Zarahemla would be right around here. So it's really not big, but it is distinct. It is 400 feet high. And the Usumacinta location is the only narrow neck location in the world that has this geographic feature. The Grijalva River has slopes up to the mountain. It does not have a hill where the hill Amnihu should be located. And some early maps put mountain artwork on the east side of the Usumacinta River, but they do that just because they need to fill up space. A map that doesn't have anything on it didn't sell very well, so you just fill in spaces that were not explored with whatever you wanted to put in there. It was usually just kind of artwork. But the hill actually didn't appear on maps until at least 1934. There's a suggestion of a hill that I found on one map in 1934, but really I didn't find any indication a hill was there until the more detailed geologic information in the 1980s and 1990s when they were starting to digitize geography. Is really what really says there's a hill there on the east side of the river. So obviously nothing that was known about that in 1831. Oh, by the way, there is a way to get from the west to the east side of the river. This is a reconstruction of what the bridge from Yaxchilan to the east side of the river looked like. It has two piers. It was about 600 feet span. At the time was the longest bridge in the world. Even when you consider bridges in Europe, this was the longest bridge in the world at the time. So the people, at least in this area, have been trying to find a way across the river easily for many, many years. Don't know when that bridge originally started. These abutments and the piers are still there. You can see them at low water level. But how far they go back, they haven't been able to date that. But it has been an issue in that part of the river to cross the river there. I just thought that was interesting. Okay, destruction of Moroni, Jerusalem, Mokum, and Onaha by water. Came across this just purely by chance. Was not looking for this. I was looking for something else. As I was doing Google searches, this article came up, and I said, well, okay, I'll go take a look at that. And I started looking at the article, and my wife Lori can attest to this. I got really excited after looking at this. So the description here is in 3rd Nephi. The cities Moroni, Onaha, Mokum, and Jerusalem were destroyed by water. So this is in 3rd Nephi 4:29 or LDS 9:4. And behold, that great city of Moroni have I caused to be sunk in the depths of the sea, and the inhabitants therefore to be drowned. Yea, and the city of Onaha, and the inhabitants thereof, and the city of Mokum, and the inhabitants thereof, and the city of Jerusalem, and the inhabitants thereof, and the waters have I caused to come up in the stead thereof. So these cities are located on the sea east coast. However, there are other cities located on the sea east coast, Lehi, Morianton, Amner, Gid, and Mulek, that were not destroyed by water. And so the question is, why are some destroyed by water and not others? So here's what it looks like on a picture. And I put little tsunami waves down here just to indicate these are where the cities were destroyed by water. But there are other cities along the coast here that were not destroyed by water. Question is, why? So we know that 3 of the cities were destroyed by waters coming up. Great. So what causes water to come up? Could it be a storm surge or a tsunami? That's really the only 2 choices you have that cause water to come up. So a storm surge along the coast in that area have been recorded at over 17 feet during hurricanes. Okay, that would certainly cover up cities along the coast. Problem with that is that winds were not described as part of the destructions for the water coming up. And so considering that King Limhi mentioned the east wind of destruction, you would think that if that was part of the destructions of the water coming up, that might be mentioned. It didn't. So storm surge also occurs over a large portion of the coast. You can't localize storm surge. Wherever the storm is, that's where the storm surge occurs. So storm surge can't be discounted, but it's not real consistent with the descriptions in the Book of Mormon. So that leaves us, let's take a look at tsunamis. They don't require any associated wind. And this is the study that I found. It was published in 2003. Nice scientific name, The Estimation of the Far-Field Tsunami Potential for the Caribbean Coast Based on Numerical Simulation. That's a wonderful thing to read right when you want to go to bed, right? And I don't know why I keyed off on a title like that, but it's like, well, okay, I'll take a look at it. So I located it in 2006. So this is after I had found and put all these places in a world location in 2004. So that's what I mentioned there. And the authors investigated the source of earthquakes, the shape of the seafloor in the Caribbean, and developed a model for predicting where tsunamis would occur. They did this because the countries in the Caribbean wanted to know, where do I need to put resources for potential tsunamis to help the people living along the coasts? And so that was why this study was done. So the summary here is we have water coming up from something that destroys only certain cities, and those are Jerusalem, Mokum, and Onaha. At the same time, water coming up does not destroy the cities along the coast. So in the study, this is from the study, they plotted where all of the earthquakes occur. And they occur all around the Caribbean, down here through Mesoamerica, across the top of South America, and across all the islands in the Caribbean, and a few smattering places, other places. Then they found all the records of historical tsunamis. And this is what they found. They found tsunamis in all the places where you can have earthquakes and across the northern part of Honduras, and they stopped right there. They could find no records of historical tsunamis along the Belize coast. And the reason for that, when they did through the numerical simulation and the depth of the ocean and where it focused in here and where the earthquakes occurred, and they essentially made earthquakes happen all around and figured out where tsunamis would occur. What they did was they found that there were certain safe areas that no matter where you start and no matter where you had an earthquake, these places would never have a tsunami. So a few places on the southern part of Cuba, a place here in South America. Oh, and oh, by the way, the coast of Belize, you can't have a tsunami. It just won't happen. So that was, I see a study like this that says we've got tsunamis where the Book of Mormon says they're tsunamis. And you're not going to have tsunamis where the Book of Mormon says we didn't record any tsunamis. I was excited. And the Isthmus of Tehuantepec is the only location for a narrow neck where you have this distinction of certain cities that can be destroyed by water and certain cities not destroyed by water. Just an aside, the Mayans knew about tsunamis. They have a wave glyph. This is from the Dresden Codex. There is a set of glyphs in Chichen Itza, and I was there, but I located this picture after I was there. I wish I had known about this. I would have actually gone around Chichen Itza and I would have located and taken my own picture of this glyph. But it has a picture of a person drowning. It has a city falling into the sea. It has a volcano erupting. It has a tsunami glyph right here and a person here in a canoe or some kind of boat. So all the destructions that we see in 3rd Nephi are actually in this glyph. So I would have loved to have had my own photograph so I could tell you exactly where it was located. Plains in Mesoamerica. Let's talk about those a little bit. There are several plains. The plains of Agash, plains of Heshlon, plains of Nephihah, and the plains near Mulek are all described in the Book of Mormon. And at a high level, this is where they're located. Plains of Agash and Heshlon are in this area by the Narrow Neck. The plains west of Mulek would be over here in the Yucatan, and the plains of Nephihah would be here in kind of northeastern Guatemala. All right, so there are plains in Mesoamerica, yes. While Mesoamerica is known for jungles, there are actually 3 areas of plains before 300 AD. 2 of these 3 plains exist today. Between about 1000 BC and 300 AD, the central lowlands of the Yucatan Peninsula were actually savanna. Right now, they're lowland forest. The climate has changed a bit to where it's now a lowland forest. But back between 1000 BC and about 300 AD, they were actually savannas. The Maya Mountains in Belize create kind of a rain shield. So the northeast part of Guatemala doesn't get as much rain as other parts, so it has a savanna area. And the Pacific Ocean helps create grasslands, the Pacific Ocean being a cool current. The cool air usually prevents rain, so it's a little bit drier there on the west coast. So there are plains in that Narrow Neck area, and there's actually a lot of place names today in the area that use the word llano, which means plain. So this is one analysis. Again, don't ask me why I find these, but this is from an analysis of compound-specific carbon isotopes of lipid biomarkers, a proxy for the paleo-environmental change in the Maya lowlands of Petén, Guatemala. I just dig these things up, I don't know where. This was published in 2005, so, I mean, when I made the map and location, this wasn't even published yet. So the summary here is they took a look at the lakes of the Petén region, which are in kind of northeast Guatemala, and they just dug down and took cores, and they started figuring out what the pollen count was going back so many years. And this is what they came up with, that at the time of the Nephites, roughly about 50% of the vegetation was grass. Today, it's only about 15%. So it's mostly forest now, but back then, it was grass. Very grass-like. So there would be plains right there. Another study, this is the paleolimnology of the Maya lowlands, published by Mark Brenner, Michael F. Rosenmeyer, and David Hodel, Jason Curtis in 2002. So they actually plotted rainfall. So at the time of the Nephites, the rainfall was at its lowest point in that area. It had been stable for a while, then it went lower, and then it's back up kind of at the stable area. So the forest during the time of the Nephites was not there. There was very little or a lot less forest than there is now. So that just corroborates the pollen study that we just saw. This, a little dark, but you can see it's kind of grassy here. There's a couple trees in the background. It's grassy here. There's some trees on the hill. This place by Popton, Guatemala, this is where these pictures come from, and so you can kind of see it's very savanna-like. It's grasslands with some savanna trees. They're not forest trees, they're actually savanna trees in one of the few places in Mesoamerica where they occur. So, if we identify where the plains occur here. During the time of the Nephites, plains occurred there, even though now it's lowland forest. And we have plains right here. Oh, by the way, all three of these are where the Book of Mormon says they ought to be. So this is the only world location where plains exist where they're described by the Book of Mormon. The plains are located, they don't correspond to the Grijalva River, theory of Book of Mormon geography. The savanna area northeast of Guatemala is not well known even today. There's really no maps published in 1830. I can't even tell you if there was a map between then and now, because even now it's hard to find that there are actually savannas in the northeast Guatemala area. It's just something that nobody ever talks about because it's like, it's there. And the plains in the Yucatan Peninsula were not even known to exist in 1830 because they were converted over to lowland forest way before Columbus. So there's even no way to know that there were plains that were there, but in the Book of Mormon it says they're there, and the scientific evidence shows that they were there at the time. So that's another proof. Talk about narrow passes for a bit. This comes from Alma 2235 and 2410, or LDS 5034 and 529. And it came to pass that they did not head them until they had come to the borders of the land desolation. And we know that land desolation is in the narrow neck by the sea west. And there they did head them by the narrow pass, which led into the sea, led by the sea into the land northward, yea, by the sea on the west and on the east. And he also set orders unto him, and they should fortify the land bountiful and secure the narrow pass which led into the land northward, lest the Lamanites should obtain that point. There are two others, these are in Mormon 161 and 169, that mention a pass into the land southward. And the Lamanites did give unto us the land northward, yea, even to the narrow passage which led into the land southward. So the land southward is a completely different direction than the land northward. So we're actually talking about another pass. In 169 or 3:5, it came to pass that I did cause my people that they should gather themselves together at the land desolation to a city which was in the borders by the narrow pass which led into the land southward. So we have two descriptions of narrow passes. So as covered previously, we talked about the city of desolation located by the sea west of the narrow neck. So the summary is there's a narrow pass that leads into the land northward. There's a narrow pass that leads into the land southward, and these passes are located near the West Sea in the area of the narrow neck or by the land desolation. All right, do they exist? Well, of course they do, otherwise I wouldn't be presenting it. So, land desolation is somewhere here in the narrow neck. There is one pass that kind of follows this route up through Oaxaca. There's another one that goes up, there's a road that goes up through here, that's the pass that goes into the land southward. For 100 miles this direction and at least 100, maybe 150 miles this direction, there is no way to get through the mountains. And this is the only pass through here. There is no other pass until you get to the pass with the intersecting valleys. And along here, it's mountainous. So these are the only two passes that exist. So it's not like you have options in saying, well, this one fits because this one's too far away. These are the only two passes that exist in this area. This is just a picture of one of the areas along the North Pass. Right here, you can see it's fairly broad at this point. The next picture I've got is a little bit further up. You can see it actually necks down to a narrow pass as it goes through the mountains at that point. So only in places where the river bed narrows out do you have any kind of habitation, but otherwise it's fairly narrow as it goes through the mountains. This is the only picture I could find of the pass on the south. This is a picture that somebody took while they were on the road that's going through this pass, back down through the pass. And you can see it's fairly narrow. The road has to switch back a couple times to even make it up through here. And this picture was taken right about here on this road. So it's about halfway up the pass. So in terms of narrow neck locations, it's the only narrow neck location that has passes both to the north and to the south. So since we're talking about passes, let's talk about the pass between Nephi-Ha and Moroni. This is described in Alma 29, 28 or 62:24. And now when the Lamanites awoke, they saw that the armies of Moroni were within the walls, and they were affrighted exceedingly, and insomuch that they did flee out by the pass. The verse here references places of Moroni and Nephi-Ha. The Lamanites fled to the land of Moroni, which was on the sea-east coast. There's a pass between the city of Nephi and the land of Moroni. And since the army of Moroni and Paharan were on the west side of the city, then this pass would be on the east side of the city for the Lamanites to escape. In the Belize Mountains, or Maya Mountains in Belize, there is only one pass. And it happens to be in the location where Nephi-Ha would be located over here by the plains, which are also located over here. This pass right here is the only pass through the mountains. There's no gap further up, and there's no gap further down until you get way down here to the south. That is the only pass through the mountains, exactly where the Book of Mormon says it ought to be. This is just an example. I have a number of sources that I look at old maps. This is an old map published in 1851. You can see it's an unbroken mountain chain. There are no passes. This is another one, again, no passes. This one, published in 1857, actually has a pass right here. This map is inaccurate. This pass does not actually exist. But it's a pass. So we'll give them a pass. All right, so the summary. We've talked about intersecting valleys, the valley west and the valley east, Ilam-Nihu, destruction of the cities by water, plains in Mesoamerica, narrow passes, and the pass between Nephi-Ha and Moroni. All of those only occur in one place of the world, in the exact same place as the Book of Mormon says they exist, if you plot that in this part of the world. Take a little break, talk a little bit about Kurulams and Kumams. Everybody has comments about this because they're not really described in the Book of Mormon very well. But let's first talk about Genesis 2:11. This is an inspired version. This is not in the King James. And out of the ground made I the Lord God, and grow every tree naturally that was pleasant in the sight of man, and man could behold it, and it became also a living soul, and it was spiritual in the day that I created it, for it remained in the sphere in which I, God, created, yea, even all things which I prepared for the use of man, and man saw that it was good for food. So the understanding of this phrase helps a lot, because for the use of man means food, not for beasts of burden and plowing fields. When it says for the use of man, it says I'm going to eat it. So the Book of Mormon has a pattern where it states both male and female of animals in 1 Nephi 5, 2:16. And it came to pass that they did find upon the land of promise, as we journeyed in the wilderness, that there were beasts in the forests of every kind, both of the cow and the ox. This is, in Hebrew, you have both a female and male, and so the ox would be female, cow would be female, ox would be male. Both the ass and the horse, ass is in Hebrew would be the female horse, and horse would be the male horse. And the goat and the wild goat, when you see wild in the Hebrew, that usually refers to the male. So we have a pattern here of female, male, female, male, female, male. And then we get to and all manner of wild animals which were for the use of men. So we could eat those. Now in Ether 421, we also have They also had horses and asses. So here we have a male and female form in Hebrew. And there were elephants and kurulums and kumums, all of which were useful unto man, and more especially the elephants and kurulums and kumums. So here we have useful for man, so all of these could be eaten. So I've checked the Akkadian and Neo-Assyrian languages, and there really is no close matches for kurulum and kumum. Tells you what I do late at night, reading Akkadian dictionaries. Now in Latin, there is a word kurulum, or kurul, which means chair of authority, and there is at least one reference that indicates it could refer to a platform set upon the elephant to ride upon. So since only authority figures rode on elephants, that was why they referred to the chair on the elephant as a kurulum. There's also a place called Kerala, or Kerala. It's a town in southwest India, which happens to be known for using domesticated elephants, and they were the source of domesticated elephants going way back. So those are really the only two close words that I could find having anything to do with animals, called kurulum or kurulum. Now there is an indicator word. Book of Mormon has several of these. Was near, I've mentioned before, means next to or adjacent to. Even or yea even indicates like what we would use as parentheses. So everywhere where you see even or yea even, whatever that is that comes right after it is explaining what comes right before it. There is across or cross, and I've mentioned that. That's only used for going across water. Up and down indicate going up in altitude or down in altitude. I've heard people try and describe up as up north. The convention of up north didn't come about until like the mid-1600s. Before that, maps had the top part could have faced west, east, south. It was just random. Somewhere in the 1600s, people started putting north at the top part, so then we got the phrase up north. Especially means more of or indicate, or more so or more of is an indicator word for especially. So now, when we go back to Ether 421, that they also had horses, which could be male, asses, which could be female, and there were elephants and kurulums and kumums, all of which were useful to man. So we can eat all these five, and more especially the elephants, kurulums, and kumums. So that indicator word indicates that kurulums and kumums were bigger than horses. So how many animals do we know of that are bigger than horses? I can think of elephants. So if we take a look at that, so are elephants used general in 420, or same as in 420 where we have all manner of cattle, which is cows in general, but then we talk about oxen, which are male, and cows, which are female. So that would make a kurulum a male and a kumum as a female elephant. Or is it elephants male, kurulum female, and kumums as a juvenile? I don't know, but all I know is a kurulum and a kumum is bigger than a horse. Finish up with a couple of interesting growth patterns in the Book of Mormon. If you take a look and plot out the first mention of cities and lands and where they occurred, I'm just going to quickly go through these, and you'll start seeing all of these geographical items show up on the map, and you'll see a pattern in how they develop. So, start off in the north part of the lands, and we have the Promised Land. And I'm just going to go through these, and you can kind of see how they grow and where they're located. Now we start going north. Go north, we come back to the south. Battle site, intersecting valleys, large river, and we get back down to Hill Rama, which is the same as Hill Cumorah. So, okay, these were just some of the ridges that were shown there. let's take a look at how the Nephites grew. So they started off at Nephi, have some wildernesses that pop up. There's the wilderness, South Wilderness, and Zarahemla that shows up there. We have some cities down south, Mormon, Wilderness of Mormon, Waters of Mormon, more cities down south, some more wildernesses, more cities down south, more wildernesses. Now we start building up along the River Sidon. There's the River Sidon that pops in there, River Valley Gideon. We start building around Zarahemla, along River Sidon. Now we are up in kind of the northwest quadrant. We get some cities growing up there. We start going down to the South Wilderness, or below the South Wilderness, and in the Lamanite lands, the headwaters, back up the East Wilderness pops in there. We start building along the South Wilderness, more along the River Sidon. Now you can see where we're not building. Now we're starting to build in on the far east side. Now we start building on the west side. So it's kind of interesting when you see it grow like that, where the patterns are occurring. All right, let's take a look at the latter part of the Nephites up in the northern part of the land. We have the River Sidon, Bountiful. We have places in the Narrow Neck. Land northward shows up. Mulek shows up. We're still kind of down in the Narrow Neck. We haven't really started now. We start seeing some of the, we're still kind of down in the Narrow Neck. Now we start building up to the north. This is where the Lamanites are starting to push them in the latter parts of the Book of Mormon. So just the way that you would normally expect societies to start building and building around each other and growing, not here and there and there and there. You kind of grow around one place and then you kind of grow around another place, because you need cities that are close to other cities to kind of provide mutual protection. And we see that in the patterns of the Book of Mormon. So I've gone over a little bit. What I have here is a website where I have this, actually not all of this, some of this stuff doesn't even show up on my website yet, but I will be putting it there. There is a website here. You could write down https://sites.google.com/site/BOM geography, or you can just put in my name and geography in a Google search and it'll be the first one that shows up. Your choice. The last one is usually easier to find the website. But there's other information. There's a lot of these proofs on the website. There's travel maps. There's a lot of other information on this website.
Thank you, Brother Eric, for sharing. I appreciate it.